Our first company this evening is Touchstone Exploration, the AIM-listed Canadian oil and gas exploration company. TXP are now the largest onshore producer in Trinidad, with a stable base of 215 legacy producing oil wells in the southwest peninsula, and with the production and exploration focused firmly on the Ortoire Block in the east, where Coho, Cascadura 1 and Cascadura Deep have produced extended flow tests of around 11,600 barrels of oil equivalent per day between them. Touchstone therefore has a sizable market cap of around 202 million currently, and London Southeast, I are delighted to welcome Paul Baay, Touchstone President and CEO. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Donald. Really appreciate the introduction, and I think I'm going to get Mike to pull up the presentation here. What I'd like to do in the presentation today is walk you through a little bit of what's happened, and we put out an RNS this morning, which I think gave a pretty good operational update. But what I'd really like to do today is talk about what's going to happen in the latter half of this year and into next year as we bring these wells on production as we move forward. So that's going to be the big part of what we do. On this cover shot that you see here, this is actually gives you an idea of the kind of area that we're operating in. This is one of the most recent wells that we drilled, and you can see that it's in a pretty jungled area within Trinidad, but by the same token, it's very close to infrastructure, and I'll show you that on the map. So it's a pretty typical oil and gas operation in what we see. The thing that we've really been focusing on or attempting to focusing on are sort of 4 different pillars that we work on within the organization. And the first one is really this concept of being opportunity rich. And I think when you look at where Trinidad is located, where our specific lands are located, it really is a hydrocarbon charged basin, very, very big reserves. And we'll show you a little bit of the geology, and then we'll show you some of the potential of the wells. And Donald and I were chatting earlier that, one of the challenges we have is these wells are so large that, it kind of sets up a little bit of a roller coaster ride when you do the exploration, just because they're so impactful, each one of them individually. So we'll talk about that. And then underpinning some of the big exploration, we've got this sort of stable legacy production, which currently is producing about 1,400 barrels a day. But the nice thing about it is it's high netback oil production. And what that allows us to do is basically pay all the bills out of that base production while we ramp it up. And to give you an example, we're doing 1,400 barrels a day now. Come the end of this year, we'll be north of 16,000 BOEs a day. So you'll see a 10-fold increase in our production over the course of the next basically 9 months. And as far as the drilling inventory goes, this is, I think, one of the key things of this story is between what we've got on the exploration and the development. We've got a 20-year drilling inventory in Trinidad, so we're going to be there for a long time, and this company's just going to continue to grow as we move along. I was also joking, it's kind of an overnight success story that took us about 11 years to put together. So it's as I say, we're going to be here for a long time. The visions and the values, we really want to invest in the community, and we really think that we're a leader in a bunch of things we're doing already, but there's still room for improvement. We'll touch on those a little. And then quite frankly is the value creation. We think that you really add value in our business by drilling wells and getting that production on and taking things from being reserves into the production base. And it's starting to be reflected in our share price. So very excited about that. So just a little bit about what I was talking about where Trinidad is located. This is a fairly detailed geological map, but I think the 2 big takeaways from this are the big yellow circle that you see there are Guyana, Suriname, up off the coast of Venezuela, and Trinidad is that yellow star. And actually that yellow star is right where our Ortoire Block is. And basically what you can see is there's been all sorts of success through here lately. Exxon's big discovery in Guyana along there, and we're going to drill a similar prospect to that in 2022. And then you've got that eastern Venezuelan basin, which is the richest hydrocarbon basin in the world that extends up past Trinidad. So you really see sort of the world-class style of exploration and development opportunities in what we see from a geological point of view. So, if you look more specifically, that yellow star basically sat right over the Ortoire Block, which you see in that mustard yellow color, and that's our exploration acreage, and that's really going to be the driver of growth for the company, and I'll talk about that in a lot more detail on another map. But at the same time, on the west side of the island, is our development acreage, which is that historical 1,400 barrel a day production. It's been as high as 2,000 barrels a day. We really just haven't focused much on it because both the capital and the manpower has been focused over at Ortoire. But you know, I don't want to underplay these assets. There's very, very large oil in place, and I think the real takeaway is some of the deeper prospects that we're seeing at Ortoire. You're going to see us start to drill some of those over on the west side of the island, and specifically at that area that you see there called Cura. There's a couple of really deep opportunities there. So we're just in the midst of renewing those contracts with the government, and when we do that, you'll see a little more of that laid out. But there's definitely a trend all the way through the island in what we see. So let me focus a little bit on Ortoire, because that's the biggest part of the story. So this has been the history, and you know, I think it's fair to say it's been a much better than average exploration program, but it has been an exploration program. You know, Coho, a great first step for us, 1,900 BOEs a day that should come on stream here, you know, sometime soon as we get approval to tie into an existing gas plant. We'll have that on within about 60 days of that notification. Cascadura is just a world-class pool that we discovered. You know, we show the one test on here at 5,400 BOEs a day. It was actually two different tests. That well, if it had bigger pipe in the hole, it could be capable of 10,000 BOEs a day. Chinook, I think, clearly a disappointment. It was, you know, we were hoping to look for another Cascadura, and we ended up in the oil window, which has really presented some challenges for us to produce. And we're going to go up hole and look at some of the development gas in that area. But, you know, I guess that would be that, you know, in the exploration game, you're going to get these as you go along. We then went back and drilled a deeper well at Cascadura, and you can see the results there, 4,200 BOEs a day on an extended flow test, and that was in the takeaway today. That, you know, that really is a fantastic second well, and what it's really set up for us is a level of confidence now in Cascadura and the block in its entirety. And then the Royston gas prospect, which I'll talk about here in a minute. So that's kind of what we've done. So this gives you a really good map of what we've got going on and where we're going to go. And I'll sort of stop on this map for a couple of minutes. The key takeaways here is the natural gas pipeline that goes right through the middle of that block. That goes up to the petrochemical business. And basically that's where all of our gas will come into. And then you see the green line that goes the opposite way through the block. That's the Heritage Oil pipeline. So we can tie in any of our liquids into that. So great infrastructure in what we're doing. But let me just kind of give you an idea of what we've got going on right now. Right now, if you look over at Coho, that little red line that you see there, that's what we're waiting for final approval from the National Gas Company to give us the green light to go ahead and tie into that plant that you see to the south there. It's going to happen. It's just a question of when it's going to happen. So, you know, there's an expression in Trinidad that says gentle pressure applied forever. And that's really what we're doing here is you just got to keep pushing little by little, but that will definitely come on stream. And then when you look over at the Cascadura, those two flames that you see there are basically Cascadura and Cascadura Deep. And those X's that you see are additional drilling locations. And on each one of those drilling pads, we'll see 2 to 4 additional locations. So it gives you an idea of how expansive Cascadura is. And now what we see at Cascadura is actually multi-sheets, and we've proved that up with Cascadura Deep. So you know, this project, as was mentioned in the RNS, is initially going to be designed for 90 million cubic feet a day and about 2,000 barrels a day of liquids. But it is being designed to expand to 200 million cubic feet a day, and it'll be about 5,000 barrels of liquids. So it kind of gives you an idea of where we're at on that. That little oil drop you see to the south is the Chinook well. That was a disappointment, but we did get light oil in all 3 zones that we tested, just not of economic amount. So the seismic clearly shows us we can move up dip to the north, and you see those again, those 2 locations that we'll be applying for that'll have 2 to 4 wells on them. So we're pretty confident with that. And then if you move over to Royston, which is that last, that big black star over on the eastern side of the block, that will be the last well of what I'm calling our phase 1 exploration development. And that is by far the biggest prospect that we've drilled so far. We would see it being up to twice the size of Cascadura. And it's sizable. The road is now built into Royston. It needs a final push on it, and then we'll be spudding that well in June, and hopefully have the results sort of 60 to 90 days after that. So then we enter into phase 2 of the exploration program, which is really the Kraken well, the Steelhead well, and the Gabine well that you see there. And they're the exact same concept as what we've seen before, except that they're a little different in some of the reservoirs we're chasing. That Kraken well, I talk about Royston being bigger than Cascadura. The Kraken well is bigger than what Royston can potentially be. It's deeper. It's the same type of prospect as what Exxon's drilling offshore in Guyana. We've tried to make this anomaly go away. We've reprocessed it. We've done all sorts of things. It's a well that's got to be drilled, so we'll get it drilled in 2022. And then Steelhead to the south of that Karamat prospect that you see there, it's kind of interesting. I got an email from one of our shareholders that found an old letter that is the weekly newspaper for Shell employees and their families, and it talks about the well that was originally drilled there in April 10th of 1959, and it says that the well was plugged back because they were trying to test it and they got stuck in the hole, and after 110 days and $400,000, they decided they had to walk away. But the indications from ditch cuttings and electronic logs gave them lots of information. So that's the well that we'll actually be twinning and hopefully using some more current technology to make sure that we get it done. But Shell was excited about it back in 1959, and we're certainly excited about it now. And then when you go over to Gabine, it's another great prospect, and it'll be drilled as part of the program. Then on top of that, we've got all the development drilling that you see. So this block now represents partly exploration, partly development, clear view to a couple 100 million cubic feet a day of gas, more than that if Royston's successful, and just a ton of prospects. So I think a lot of people are kind of stuck that we might be at the end of the Ortoire exploration. I would argue that we're at the very beginning of what's going to be a pretty exciting 5-year program. So this is just gives you the Royston prospect, and the reason I put it up here is it kind of gives an idea of what we do. So we basically have an old log from 1965. We've got brand new seismic that we've shot. We've got an interpretation. This is what we use. We go in and we're basically twinning an old well that we think has 700 feet of bypass pay. We're going to take the well about 1,000 feet deeper, and our view is pretty simple here, is that we think that if you can prove hydrocarbon in this, then you set up 4 to 8 development locations, and up to a TCF of gas just in that prospect alone. So this is kind of how these models come together. So in summary, I think the key part for the Ortoire Block is we've got this great gas contract with the National Gas Company. They'll take all the gas that we deliver to them. They will build the pipelines into our various wells. So our capital cost is really just drilling and getting them on stream. The drilling inventory in here is at least 10 years when you look at exploration and development. We've got 21 exploration targets now in those various blobs that you saw on that map. And as far as local content goes, it's been really exciting to get involved with the community there. And I think once we start to generate some revenue, right now we're just spending money, but when we start to generate some revenue, there's some really exciting things that we're going to get involved with in the community. And then the other assets that I don't want to ignore, but I think it's important. Scott, our CFO, has just been negotiating to get a 10-year extension on that. And basically what it is it's our base production. We got 10 fields, we got 200 drilling locations. It's big oil in place. We're bringing a new rig into the country later this year that is specifically designed to drill these wells really efficiently, plus being able to go to 15,000 feet at Ortoire. So, we're going to have all the equipment, we're going to have all the technology that we need to improve our drilling, lower our costs, doing all of those things that we want to do. So it's really set up a great opportunity for us. And then, talk a little bit about the visions and values. It's our team in Trinidad is all local content. It's been really tough not having to be able to get down there in the last 14 months, but quite frankly, the team has just ran things flawlessly. There are some pretty restrict COVID, measures in place right now, and the team continues to operate, through that, and putting safety before everything else. But it's really impressive to see that everything is going on, and our involvement in the community, I think, is above anything that we've seen. So pretty excited about that as well. I'm looking forward to get back there. It's tough to spend an entire winter in Canada when you don't get the opportunity to go to Trinidad, at least for a couple of trips. So just talk about gas supply and consumption, and I won't get stuck on this for very long, but we get asked this a lot. Basically, total demand in Trinidad is 4 BCF a day, and current production is about 2.6 BCF. So I'd like to say we could fill that over time. Bottom line is we won't, but I think what it should give a lot of comfort to shareholders is that any gas and oil that we find in Trinidad is going to have a market with a high load factor, and is going to generate just a ton of cash for us when it gets on stream. Just a little bit about reserve growth. Obviously, 2020 was a huge expansion year for us, and we're hoping for the same thing in 2021 with both the results we've seen at Cascadura Deep and the drilling we've got coming up at Royston. Our P1 reserves in 2020 were higher than our P3 reserves in 2019, and pretty happy to cross through that 100 million barrel mark of P3 reserves independently evaluated. So I think this also goes through to shareholder value and underlying asset value. Just again, some of the value creation, we're keeping a really close eye on the balance sheet. We've got 15 million of cash. Probably the biggest question I get right now is with the delays that are happening in Trinidad, are you going to have to do an equity issue? Scott, James, and I are focused on one thing, and that's getting everything on production, and we'll push the capital out so that we can manage our way through both the availability on the credit facility and the cash that we've got on hand. We'll get through to that and get production on, and then we can fund the rest of the program and ramp it up out of the cash flow. So I don't know how to give anybody any more comfort on that than just tell them, if you look at the numbers, we're really well funded to get through to this program. So that's, I won't go through all of these. I think the real takeaway for me today is that we are at the beginning of the program at Ortoire. We've got a good history in what we're doing, and really what the company needs to do now is convert reserves into cash flow and into production, and that's what we're focused on doing. And we'll do it as quickly as we can, but it's been 20 years since anybody's brought on new onshore gas in Trinidad. So, there's going to be some obstacles and some plays along the way, but we're pushing as hard as we can. And if you can't sense the excitement in my voice, it's there, and that this Royston prospect, the next prospect, looks really interesting as well. So excited to have that going on. I didn't mention too, we're also shooting 20 kilometers of seismic that'll be done by the end of June to further define Royston, but really help define that deep Kraken prospect, that Cretaceous prospect that we look at going forward. So Donald, I'll turn it back over to you. I was probably a little bit longer than you wanted me to be, but I apologize for that.
No need to apologize. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul. I'm going to sort of slightly put a dampener on things and say, let's talk COVID-19 in Trinidad as a starting point. I think it might be useful for shareholders. Everyone's getting excited about the prospects, but at the end of the day, what's happening in Trinidad at the moment is there's a curfew just been imposed, and it must be quite tricky times. So how difficult is it for you? Well, you're in Calgary, the team are in Trinidad. How difficult has it been to actually sort of progress things in such difficult times?
Yeah, the nice thing in Trinidad is we're deemed an essential service. So, from that point of view, they can still move around. For instance, even under the state of emergency, all those are curfew at night, we've got passes, so our team can move around. And in some cases, there's less traffic on the road. So, it's a little easier to move around in some cases. I think the real challenge has been more on the paperwork side, getting the government approvals and getting the NGC and those kind of things. It'd be really nice to kind of sit down in our room and grind it out with the necessary parties. That's been a bigger challenge. I think the physical on the ground stuff has been moving, fairly well. So I think that's probably it. And because we operate it with virtually all locals, we probably got a competitive advantage on that from that point of view. So.
Okay. So my second question, selfishly, my second question for me, you're thinking and planning as a much bigger company because your future is you're a medium-sized player. So you have to ramp up your spending. You're actually thinking about spending more rather than saving, which has presumably been your normal mindset. You've got a more powerful drilling rig due to arrive in September, for example. Has it been a difficult transition to make, to start thinking of yourselves as a much bigger company?
Short answer to that is no. And I think if you look at the organization from the top down, it kind of explained that. If you look at our chairman, John Wright, or two or three of the people that are on board, they've all been involved with multi-billion-dollar organizations before, oil and gas companies. In my previous life, I've been CEO of two previous public companies that went from roughly 600 BOEs a day to 26,000 BOEs a day before they were either sold or parceled up. So, we've kind of been there before. We've been through this before. We know what we have to do. The one really nice thing about this is you get to 20,000 BOEs a day with 5 wells, right? It's not like you have 100 wells here, because these are big wells that we're talking about. So from that point of view, logistically, it's quite a bit simpler.
There are serious economies of scale here because you're talking so big.
Yeah, I mean, your G&A costs on a BOE basis, drop to pennies. All of those kind of things kind of happen as you do it. But the entire team, right from top to bottom, has been through this before, so we do know how to do it, and we're putting some of those things in place as we go forward. So I don't see that as a challenge. I think it's the challenge here for me is it's a little tougher to do it in a foreign jurisdiction. Things just take a little longer, and I'm not really a good patient person.
I can sense that, but that's good in an oil man, and I'm sure your shareholders think that's a terrific thing.
Yeah, the problem is though, you tend to be optimistic too, so people get frustrated with my optimism, and then we get delays, right? So,
but hey, you wouldn't be in the oil business if you weren't optimistic. Now I've got lots and lots of questions. What I'm going to do, how about we say we do 30 seconds per question? We try and get through as many as we can, and I'm just going to chuck from that though. So Jürgen Walderson says, you said you could borrow money for development. Will you borrow money to get more wells at Cascadura quickly? 30 seconds.
Short answer is yes. We've already talked to the bank. They're interested in expanding the line. Once we have clear sight that pipeline and facilities and everything are going to happen, yeah, we're happy to step up to the plate and do that. Okay,
30 seconds. James Wyman, can you tell more about the composition of the liquids? What price have you achieved for any liquids relative to Brent? What netbacks do you forecast? There you go.
Yeah, so the liquids are about 20 to 25 barrels per million. So let's say 100 million a day, you're going to have roughly 2,500 barrels. Right now, the price on the island would be Brent less 25%. So a pretty big discount to Brent. We're looking at ways to maybe optimizing that by doing a direct sell to BP with some of our liquids.
Would that be possible?
Pardon me?
Might that be possible?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, BP is one of the big producers on the island, and they're obviously a big marketer around the world. But right now, I think if people are using a model, it's Brent less 25%, and then you take the 12.5% royalty off of that.
Okay, fantastic. That's very helpful. Would you be interested in doing joint ventures with other people, such as Heritage Petroleum? Asks Adrian Navarro.
So they're already our partner. Obviously, they're 20% in this. They're a partner in all of our other 21 blocks or 10 blocks that we've got on the West Coast. So they're already our partner in everything. I know there's been lots of talk about things, but we do partnerships with them all the time. We've purchased all the 3D seismic from them. We've got 2 water floods that we're already doing with them. We're doing a bunch of partnerships with them already. We probably should talk about those more, but we work very, very closely with them, and yeah, I think, yeah, we'll continue to expand that for sure.
Excellent. Peter Hamilton says, do you expect to release a reserves update incorporating Cascadura Deep results in the next few weeks or thereafter?
Yeah, the answer is no. It certainly won't be in the next few weeks. We've talked about that. I think what we'd really like to do is drill Royston first, get it tested, and then go from there and do a reserve report after that.
Okay. Take a holistic overview once you've done phase 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Ivor Hardy thinks you're doing a great job. Please keep it up. What model of new rig are you bringing into Trinidad, and how much money do you expect to save per well drilled?
Okay, not my area of expertise. That's a disclaimer right at the front. It's a telescopic double. The key things are it's got a top drive on it. The mud pumps are much larger, which will get around some of the issues that we've dealt with. We think it should save us about 25% of time, which should be a 25% savings on the rig costs. So that's our plan right now. $1 million up front by us to move it onto the island, and we have to commit to 120 days a year for the next 3 years. So not an onerous contract by any means.
And it's slightly stuck between whatever it is and Trinidad at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah, it's in Houston. It's ready to ship. They just don't want to ship it under the while the Trinidad's under a state of emergency. So once that's lifted, they'll put it on a boat and send it over.
Okay. What confidence? Peter Hamilton asks, what confidence level in percentage terms do you have that Cascadura will be on production and generating revenues by the end of this year?
Yeah, that's probably the key question for all of us. I would say right now 75% that it is going to be on. And if it's slopping around a little bit, it's going to be a result of this new approach we've taken, where we've asked the government for one big approval for the entire Cascadura area, for pipelines, for drilling, for roads, for facilities, for everything. That may push out the start date a little bit. But long term, I'm going to be able to sit here and talk to my shareholders and say, here's our 3-year plan for Cascadura when we're done.
Well, this is my question. Will it take you months to do that environmental impact assessment?
Yeah, it's probably going to take at least till September, because we have to do some sampling, dry season, wet season, got to do some, scouting for ocelots and all those other fun things that we need to do, which quite frankly is a good thing to do, because then we can design the facilities and appropriately. So.
Where are we? When will NGC build the spar to the Cascadura side? Interesting. You thought it might all be done by May and then first gas thereafter, but somehow it hasn't. So tell us all.
Yeah, I think some people got a little confused by that. We never said that Cascadura would be on in May. It's always been sort of targeting the end of the year. NGC is probably ahead of us. That pipeline will probably, because of this new approach we're taking, NGC is not going to be the holdup at Cascadura. The holdup at Cascadura will be how quickly we can get approvals to build our part of that process.
All right, Paul, we've still got tons and tons of questions, but the horrible and honest reality is we've come to the end of our time. So I can't thank you enough for joining us from Calgary today to update us on the happenings in Trinidad. Thank you so much. It's really fascinating.
Thanks for including us, and thanks for running the slides for me, Mike. Appreciate that.